The Premier League no longer belongs to England. Today, 80% of the clubs are foreign-owned. The only ones with local management are Tottenham, West Ham, Brighton, and Brentford. There is a territory that stands out as the main owner of the show, the United States. They have Manchester United, Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, Burnley, Everton, Fulham, Leeds, Crystal Palace, Aston Villa, and Bournemouth. We are talking about more than half of the league. The remaining 5 are in the hands of the United Arab Emirates, with Manchester City, Saudi Arabia with Newcastle, Greece with Nottingham Forest, Switzerland with Sunderland, and China with Wolves. Seeing this image, England seems to be just the place where the tournament is held. But the interesting thing is that it was not always like this. A few decades ago, practically all the clubs were owned by people who lived in the country, in the city, or even in the neighborhood of the team. What happened for us to get to this point? Perhaps the best starting point to understand it is the year 2003, more specifically the month of July. That's when this man, Roman Abramovich, bought Chelsea. For context, according to Forbes magazine, in 2006, he had the 11th largest fortune in the world, with $18.2 billion. The price he paid for the Blues was no less than £140 million. Never before had so much been spent on a team. Looking at today's numbers, it seems like a bargain, but we'll get to that. Before their arrival, only 2 teams had foreign owners. Fulham with the Egyptian Mohammed Al Fayed, and Portsmouth with the Serbian Milan Mandaric. At this point, you're probably thinking, quite rightly, why don't we consider those 2 people as the start of foreigners in England? First of all, because in the case of Fulham, the owner had been living in the United Kingdom for many years. He was even naturalized. He was part of the environment. As for Portsmouth, although it experienced a meteoric rise under the new management, the financial investment was not a transformative factor. It was in keeping with the rest of the tournament. Abramovich, on the other hand, broke all the norms, and as we know, others followed in his footsteps. The first wave of new owners came between 2005 and 2007. The next big news came from the Glazer family in the United States when they bought Manchester United. Shortly after, it was the turn of Arsenal, Aston Villa, West Ham, Liverpool, Manchester City, Sunderland, Birmingham City, and even Derby County met the same fate. By 2007, the list reached more than half of the tournament. For a few seasons, the number remained stable between 9 and 12 clubs. These variations were not explained by changes in ownership, but rather by the rise and fall of clubs with different structures. The next major wave would occur between 2015 and 2017. There would be Bournemouth, Crystal Palace, Everton, Leicester City, Southampton, Sunderland, Watford, West Bromwich Albion, Swansea City, and Hull City. At this point, the final number had already risen to 15 of the 20 clubs, that is 75% of the entire league. That's how, after some minor changes, we reach the current picture, where 16 groups are managed by non-English individuals or entities. Now then, the reality is that we have not yet said anything about the reasons for this to happen. What happened when the Russian arrived in 2003 that suddenly all the locals felt the need to sell their institutions? You see, the purchase of Chelsea in 2003 was a turning point because Abramovich came with such a superior economic offer that it outpaced all the others. That power allowed him to form a highly competitive team and start winning trophies. The problem was that those who wanted to challenge him had no choice but to follow the same path. Otherwise, all the good players would head in the same direction, towards the gates of Stamford Bridge. To put it in context, before the Russian arrived, Arsenal had a payroll much higher than Chelsea's. While the Reds spent $59 million on their players in the 2002 to 2003 season, the Blues spent $45 million. However, just one season later, the numbers were completely different. Chelsea spent no less than $116 million, almost doubling the amount of their competitor 12 months ago. Back to Chelsea, their financial superiority was also evident in the release clauses they paid for their transfers. The Russian allocated $500 million in the first 4 years. Nobody even came close to that figure back then. Clearly, the financial controls of today did not exist either. The former president of Hull City, Paul Duffin, mentioned that every time Chelsea came knocking, the player's price automatically had an extra 0. From that point on, the others had no choice. They either matched those numbers or gave up the chance to win trophies. David Dine himself, the former president of Arsenal, acknowledged that it had become impossible to compete without foreign investment. That was the main reason why the English owners had no choice but to sell them to people with greater financial power. However, it's one thing for the clubs to need the money and quite another for there to be people willing to give it to them. What was the reason Abramovich was spending so much? Was it a planned investment strategy or just a personal whim? Because if it was the latter, it would be really difficult for other teams to find people willing to waste money like him. The short answer is no, it was not a whim. The Russian was fully aware of what he was getting into. the Premier League was in the midst of a transformation that promised incredible business opportunities for the future. Perhaps the best reflection of this is the evolution in television rights. That is, the amount that media outlets have been paying for the broadcasting of the matches. When the tournament began under this name back in 1992, £304 million were paid to televise the matches within England. Given that this figure was for a total of 5 years, it implied an average of £61 million per season. By the time of the next negotiation in 1997, the figure went up to about £168 million annually. We are talking about almost triple. Then, in 2001, we saw the next big jump, meaning no less than £367 million per season. Around those years, Abramovich saw what was happening and understood that the party was just beginning. By 2013, the annual amount had climbed to £1,006,000, a number that would even continue growing to the present. If we compare it with what the other major leagues in Europe receive, we will understand the magnitude of these figures. The £1.97 billion of the Premier League represent almost twice that of the £1.194 billion of the Spanish League and the £1.121 billion of the Bundesliga, not to mention Serie A and France's Ligue 1, which appear much further down. Although the true secret of the English tournament, if we can still call it that, is not the national contracts, but what it receives for the broadcast of its matches in the rest of the world. This route generates an extra 2.56 billion euros for them, meaning more than 4 times the 835 million from La Liga and more than 6 times that of Serie A, the Bundesliga, and Ligue 1. We mention all this because it's not just about numbers on a paper. They are the backbone of the tournaments, and to a large extent of the teams that are part of it. Taking into account all revenue segments, in 2024, the 20 clubs of the Premier League generated no less than 7.353 billion euros. Far behind are the other 4 leagues. Ultimately, all of this impacts the value of the squads, obviously affecting performance on the field. While there are incredibly strong teams outside of Europe, taking all the teams in the championship into account, there is no doubt the Premier League is number 1. While the 20 teams in this tournament have a player value of 11.77 billion euros, La Liga ranks second with 5.29 billion, and Serie A is third with 5.07 billion. Further behind is the Bundesliga with 4.48 billion and Ligue 1 with just 3.52 billion euros. It's clear that the Premier League has become the best business platform in the world of football. That's why more and more people want to be a part of it. Now, doing business doesn't just mean making an economic profit through the club's activities. Certainly, every foreign owner has different goals. Some indeed see it as a profitable move. That is to say, they acquire the institution with the goal of growing it and in the future, generating more profits. Fenway Sports Group, for example, bought Liverpool in 2010 with this idea in mind. They believe their expertise in the sports industry, mainly due to managing other franchises like the Boston Red Sox and MLB, would be very useful in football. And they have indeed done well. When they acquired the institution, it was worth £300 million. According to Forbes, it is currently valued at $4.2 billion. That is 12 times more. Other owners, while not necessarily in favor of overspending, don't just focus on economic returns, but also on something else, exposure. Clubs like Manchester City or Newcastle, which are owned by sovereign wealth funds, use the teams to promote brands from their regions. That's why we see Etihad Airways and Salam on the front of their jerseys. They are companies that the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia want to promote. It is even suggested that these groups are part of a practice known as sports washing. This involves using sports as a mechanism to clean the image of a specific kingdom or government. As a result, football, including the Premier League, goes far beyond what happens on the field. It serves as a vehicle for making investments, building relationships, and even promoting the culture and businesses of specific regions. At this point, or at some moment in the video, probably some of you have wondered, why didn't this happen in other European countries? What is the reason why a league like the Italian one, which was number 1 during the 80s, did not experience the same growth? The truth is, there isn't a single answer. Each tournament had different reasons for which, at least during that initial wave in the 2000s, the English tournament was chosen. In Spain, although the 1990 sports law led many clubs to become public limited companies, there were certain restrictions on foreign capital. For the 2024 to 2025 season, only 6 teams had a foreigner as their main owner. The rest remains in the hands of local business people or directly in the hands of the members. As far as Germany is concerned, the famous 50+1 rule applies there. This indicates that clubs can receive private investment, but the majority of shares and therefore decisions must be in the hands of the members. One of the exceptions to this is RB Leipzig, which is controlled by the company Red Bull. If you want us to make a video about how they managed to do it without breaking the rules, let us know in the comments. In Italy's case, although there is no explicit rule prohibiting foreigners, the regulatory framework significantly discourages investments. According to Luca Ferrari, a partner at the law firm Witters, the drawbacks go even further. Although the acquisition process has its own challenges, the real test lies in managing the club within the complex framework of financial, organizational, and sporting regulations. Despite this, currently 12 out of the 20 clubs in Serie A already have foreign capital. The most important cases are AC Milan and Inter Milan. Both received strong investment investments from the United States and are already in a process of transformation. Of course, this happened more than 10 years after the boom in England. Finally, regarding France, we are only now starting to see some general change. The biggest investment in this tournament was made by the Qatari Sovereign Fund when it acquired Paris Saint-Germain in 2011. Perhaps the great sporting advantage it has over the rest is a clear proof of what did not happen to the others. England, unlike these other 4 leagues, was fully prepared to welcome foreigners. A clear modernization plan for the tournament and practically no restrictions on international capital. It's true that some transparency was requested, but nothing close to the regulations we have imposed today. Perhaps the final question of this story is whether it was the right decision. Should the Premier League have imposed some control or restriction on the massive influx of these foreign billionaires? The answer clearly goes far beyond a simple yes or no. So let's quickly look at the positive and negative impacts. The main advantage is quite obvious. With more money, clubs signed the best players in the world, thus increasing the sporting level of the tournament. That, at the end of the day, triggered a kind of virtuous cycle that generated higher income and raised the level even further. The important thing about that is that it didn't happen in 1 or 2 isolated clubs, but it was something widespread. Their performance is so high that I would venture to say any team can compete for the title in nearly all leagues worldwide. That has a direct impact on the quality of the product. Most of the matches are worth tuning into, thereby increasing the audience and consequently leading to a higher value of those television rights. Furthermore, that high level within England then translates into good performance at a continental level. If we look at the last 5 editions of the Champions League, in 3 of them, there was at least 1 English team in the final. And if we extend the timeline back to Abramovich's arrival in 2003, the data is even more impressive. Out of the 22 finals played, 12 featured at least 1 Premier League team. However, it's true that they have struggled to secure victories. On the other hand, the arrival of new owners has not only meant money for players, but also for infrastructure. The Etihad campus of Manchester City, considered one of the most modern sports complexes in the world, or Everton's new stadium, are just some examples of this. Not to mention that some clubs were headed for bankruptcy if these funds didn't appear. Leicester City, for instance, was bought in 2010 by the Thai family Srivadana Prabha, and most of us know how far they went afterward. However, it's not all sunshine and roses. Let's move on to see the negative aspects, which, believe me, are not negligible. Perhaps the biggest downside of this phenomenon was the inflation of costs. Excessive spending creates a sort of bubble around player prices. Many believe it continues to this day and will burst at any moment. To give you an idea, in the year 2003, when Abramovich appeared, the Premier League had a total wage expenditure of $757 million. Today, that figure exceeds $4 billion. In other words, an increase of more than 400. A real madness. As far as the transfer market is concerned, the English are in a league of their own. If we consider the amount spent on signings between 2015 and 2024, those in the Premier shelled out no less than 23.02 billion euros. In second place, considerably further back, is Italy with 10.84 billion, and in third place is Spain with just 7.94 billion. Obviously, all that money doesn't just come out of the owners' pockets. They have made sure to squeeze every last penny the club can generate to sustain such a level of spending. This includes, among other things, the price of tickets, shirts, and products sold in the stadium. Let's analyze for a second the evolution of a ticket for the legendary cop stand of Liverpool at Anfield. When the Premier League started in 1992, it cost £4. Well, in 2024, 32 years later, the number is 39, which is almost 10 times more. You might say, that makes a lot of sense. There's something called inflation that causes prices across the economy to rise over time. But if we look at the inflation data in England during the years of that period, we will find that a product that cost £4 in 1992 should cost £9.59 in 2024, not £39. While the prices in the economy increased by 139%, football tickets went up by 875%. Nowadays, many claim that these costs and the overall offering are more geared towards tourists than true fans. And that does not only apply to the tickets, but also to the match schedules. The Premier League, in its quest to capture audiences around the world, schedules them more with Asia and North America in mind than its own England. At the end of the day, all this can lead to a club starting to lose at least part of its identity. Many owners are considerably distant from the organization. Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed, owner of Manchester City, has been seen no more than twice at the Etihad Stadium since they took over the team more than 15 years ago. Others directly go against the tradition itself. Just remember when the owner of Cardiff City decided to change the classic blue to red, or the case of Hull City, where they wanted to rename it to Hull Tigers for commercial reasons. Within the country, it is also questioned whether this influx of star footballers is somehow overshadowing the development of local players. Usually what happens is that young players grow up in a club in their country, try to make it to the first team, and then think about the big teams. How can this happen if absolutely all the top division teams hire talent from abroad? In this case, it seems that the way is to go abroad, develop, and once established return to their country. This shows once again that the Premier League is nothing more than a global tournament based in England. From the owners to the players, including match schedules and stadium proposals, everything is designed for a worldwide audience. Whether it was the right move or not, we can discuss in the comments. What is beyond doubt is that thanks to that, it became the most competitive league in the universe. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.